You're listening to the podcast Coffee with Mike and Julie, Libertarians Talk Psychology. This is current commentary from an MBA businessman and a PhD psychologist.
Look what they done to my song, Ma.
I am fascinated by a little Dave Smith, Robbie-the-Fire Bernstein dialogue where they talk about boomers. They slam the shit out of us boomers.
I thought it was funny
really,
as hell.
It was really funny. I'm going to play it. And in the same process, they talked about they did an excellent discussion about student loans. So I want to play their podcast. I want to defend the boomers at some point in our conversation about some of the good things we boomers did in our generation, because they're right about the bad things that we did. And I want to point out a lot of this dilemma that we're talking about is a problem with abundance, that we get to be so good at making
with
money.
the cycle.
As a culture, we get so good at making money, we have abundance, and then we got to fight all the people who want to screw up the system.
Well, that's a very good point in the sense, but by the way, I want to mention that this clip is long, but it's very worth the audience listening to it. It's just so insightful and funny. I mean, it's funny. They're not laughing, but we were laughing our asses off.
Funny. They know it's funny.
They know it's funny.
Yeah.
They know not to laugh at their own jokes. I hate that when people laugh at their own jokes.
Okay, so here it is.
I have a bit about the waste of time that I spent in college, and I can never figure out this angle, but to me, it's the funniest part of it is that while they're teaching you sociology or whatever else, they have departments to sell you on coming to the school. They have lobbyists that got the government funding. And then they got the people that are selling you on taking the loan. Like, that's the shit that they should be teaching us. Like, these people understand sales and persuasion. You know what I mean? Like, they know how to run a business. They're running a very successful business, which is highly manipulative. And the product that they're actually teaching you, like, teach me the other thing. That would actually be worthwhile.
Well, it's funny because when you look at like this stuff, is as the cost of college it has just skyrocketed to like insane amounts. So the cost of college is so high, and right, you have all of these people are just padding their pockets. You have all these administrators who are making six-figure salaries. Then the colleges have things. It's not like, any of this money goes into learning. Like, I don't know, a classroom is still a classroom. It's still the same. You're reading a great book. Like, okay, it's not like tuition going up needs to cover that. So no, but they have like Olympic-sized swimming pools, and they have like cafeterias with 72 different options of what you can eat and all this stuff. It's this huge scheme, and the kids really are preyed upon. I do have a lot of sympathy for the younger generation, the Generation Z or whatever. I mean, these guys. And everyone likes to fucking take shots at them. There's a lot of like the boomers really like to take shots at the millennials and Generation Z.
Because they just want to shame us after they stole all the money.
Well, that's right.
They're the greatest wealth expansion in human history. They're the greatest whiners that ever lived in human history. They couldn't have had it better. And then they shamed us like we're the generation with the spoons in our mouths as we constantly faced bubbles poppings that they created.
Yeah,
they're the biggest assholes that ever lived.
You literally got rich from living in your house, and then like you said, participated in the greatest expansion in the history of the world. And then what are you handing to the next generation? A mountain of debt. Just a mountain of debt. That's right. You took the greatest inheritance in the history of the world and blew it all in one generation. And on top of that, there's just a lot of other like social things, like, look, they like the boomer generation. And by the way, not all boomers are bad. There's some good ones out there. But speaking in broad terms, like the boomer generation, they normalized they normalized divorce for, just because, I don't know, we don't like each other anymore. Not like, there's some horrible thing in the marriage, we need to get divorced. Like, it was just kind of like, I don't know, we're bored, we're getting divorced. They abandoned all types of like traditional values, and feel however you feel about that. The real issue is they didn't replace it with anything. And so you have these kids, so many of them, is like, look, these kids grew up, yes, materially speaking, they were okay. They had cool toys, you know what I mean, when they were kids. They got better video games than previous generations. And they were well fed. Like they didn't deal with poverty. But there are these kids who grew up with no family, like not without an intact, family, didn't have a father in the house. Kids grew up, without any sense of kind of like meaning or purpose or direction. Many of them were put on psychotropic drugs from the time they were very little. And then every person in their life, every adult around them steers them toward, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to go to college. You're supposed to take out this money. Then they come out in the post, 2008 world into this kind of devastated economy that's completely rigged against them. And it's and you're like, they're going and they got like a job at Starbucks and they're in $150,000 of debt. Oh, and by the way, the price of a house is like $700,000. You're like,
yeah, and
I don't know. Huh?
No, it's just wild to think the alternative, if you did private school your whole life, the alternative would be your parents could put you into a $300,000 business at age 18 or 24 or whatever the fuck it is.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I mean, it's like, And so we're all walking through the system. But then from that kid's perspective, right? Like, what are they going to turn to other than socialism? And like, what are they going to turn to? Whatever form of socialism that is. And I'm using that kind of loosely, like just even this like debt forgiveness. But like, dude, I'm $150,000 in debt. Okay. I make $13 an hour. A house is $700,000. What's my path here to having a life, to having a family, to go like the only path that you could possibly see that sounds plausible is like Bernie Sanders going like, well, I'll make your debt go away. Now you don't have your debt anymore. I'll make them pay you more. I'll make them give you a free house. I'll make them get like, it almost becomes an inevitable conclusion of this, that they're like, well, if this is capitalism, then I'm for whatever the fuck the opposite of this is. So it's like, I do recognize that a lot of these kids really are victims of the college scheme. They're victims of a lot of things about our culture and our society. However, debt forgiveness is the worst possible solution to all of this. It punishes the least guilty people. Like it punishes the people who look, you could say, okay, that 18-year-old was kind of taken advantage of, but he did still take out the money and get to go to college with it, right? Or go to college with it. Who really shouldn't be responsible for that is the 18-year-old who was smart enough to not take out that loan and not go waste it on a degree that wouldn't be able to pay it back. So now that guy's got to subsidize the guy who made the bad decision.
Okay, so I'll let you respond first. Or you don't want to respond first? You're frowning.
You'll let me respond first.
Well, you talking about how I'm dominating things with a lecture. I'm trying not to lecture.
Okay. You want me to lecture? Okay, so which topic are we talking about first? The boomers or
Let's talk about the boomers first.
The loans. Okay. So I thought that was hilarious. The boomers are whiners and complainers, but fundamentally, I'm in agreement with the critique of the boomers. We're boomers, okay, and we really effed up. We really did. We didn't know any better in our defense, but we didn't communicate the principles. So we really let our children down because we did not communicate the values, and Dave Smith says that. Mm-hmm. That those kids had better video games than any kids in history before them. And we put them in front of the TV set. The women went to work, the men went to work, nobody's home, nobody's having dinner. That research on dinner, that if you have dinner with your children, there's like the incidence of delinquency goes way down. Of course, families.
Well, we didn't do much of that.
Oh, but we bought fried chicken and filled them up with trans fats and pizza. Off all the fast foods. I mean, we really blew
all the
it.
Foods that I really miss now.
Yeah, now we can't eat any of them. They're all they're not on the keto diet. They're not on the carnivore diet.
A good cheese.
And this shows up in the research. This shows up in the research that the family system. He points out that we normalize divorce. That's very insightful.
Right. When we were kids in elementary school, divorce was unheard of.
Nobody was divorced, and it was a very shameful thing.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, that you come from an odd family. The family system, we broke up the family system. We made casual sex okay. I was watching this movie. What was I? Oh, Prada. Devil Wears Prada, which, is kind of a strange movie, by the way. But she has sex with somebody after one night, first date, and she just got out of a relationship, and it's like, it's no big deal. Yeah. It's no big deal. So we normalized casual sex, we normalized divorce, we normalized serial monogamy. We normalized things that hurt the kids. But he makes the point that we gave the kids all this money. We gave them everything. And now we're whining about it. Although,
well, I thought their complaint about the boomers was correct, and I think the boomers are correct when they complain about the millennials. That the boomers kind of feel like, well, we led by example. Why can't you see the value of the good things that we did? And there were good things that the boomers did, and let me go through them real quick.
Okay.
The human rights movements of the 60s, that was the boomer generation that recognized women and black people need to be treated as human beings and not as, less than human beings. The anti-war protests of the 60s and 70s. Of course, I'll even throw in one that not very involved in, but music.
The music industry was, sex, drugs, and rock and roll is all the same movement.
Yeah.
But
the biggest thing the boomers did was, and I say my man Milton Friedman led this, was the economic education of the world. The world,
you think
world hunger and famine and disease, that we've had the greatest 30 years in the history of the world when it comes to worldwide poverty and improving that, and that is 100% because of people like Milton Friedman, who sold the free market principles, and countries like the Soviet Union and China and India. Their masses, they released those masses to free market principles, and it worked.
Well, what you're talking about, I don't think the boomers rode that wave, but there was a renaissance going on in the 60s that you're talking about.
Well, that's a swing. I attribute that to the boomers. You don't do that? You don't believe that?
Well, to the degree the boomers, it's like attributing the fan base of the Beatles' popularity to their fan base. It's a synergy. It's back and forth. I mean, Enlightenment was coming in the 60s. Enlightenment was coming, and it was a bidirectional influence. The boomers got together. It was an age of enlightenment because the boomers. Okay, so this is a good
credit to that.
This is a good
credit.
Let me just say, do we get credit for the fact that World War II caused the men to go away, and then the men came back, and then there was a boomer generation? Do you going to take credit for the boomer generation when in fact it was a result of World War II?
Oh, so so let me understand what you're suggesting is that the boomers exist because of the men returning from World War II.
Yeah, that was why the boomer generation.
Okay, I'll accept that. But still, the men from World War II existed because of stuff that happened before them.
Okay.
But the boomers existed for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And because of the boomers' antisocial attitude or change agent attitude, they instituted a lot of good changes.
No, I agree with you on that. It was the first time. It was synergistic. It was bidirectional. It was a renaissance in social rights. And it was based partly on there was abundance enough that you had the opportunity to focus on social rights.
Yeah.
So I think we're in agreement about the boomers. I don't take credit for things that were beyond my control.
Well,
I was a boomer. I am a boomer. And, I was handed a certain set of variables, and I hope I made the best of them.
The thing that I'll say about it is, and I think you're the same thing, is we were not active protesters we were not active in the positive things that boomers brought. I streaked. That's the only active thing.
That was a sexual revolution, and you streaked twice.
I was the first streaker in Baton Rouge at LSU.
I'd say you had a hand in that. The busting out of tradition. The boomers were an adolescent fueled intellectual change, social change time.
And see, I would say that Dave Smith goes too far objecting about divorce. Divorce was like, these people were trapped in those relationships because of social pressure.
Yeah.
So it needed to be released. Now, they went too far. I mean, they got divorced over nothing.
He said it, I thought, in a nutshell, is we didn't replace it with anything.
There you go.
We destroyed institutions that weren't working, but we didn't replace it with anything, and that's clear in the research.
I think he's right about that.
Only thing we replaced it with was money.
But that's where we incorrectly blame the millennials.
Yeah.
We blame the millennials that they don't just catch on. That we tore it all down and
you should rebuild it.
No, why can't you see what was good and what was bad?
Well, that's a damn good point. We tend to go, why can't you see this? And we didn't give them any bridge for understanding it. Now, on the other hand, our children, here I'm going to say, our children seem to have got the capitalist insight because of what? We put them on a token economy at 5 years old. Yeah. They were doing their own wash at 5 years old. I put our children on a token economy because I was going to work and didn't have time to parent them.
Yeah.
So they had a token system. That's what capitalism is, a token system.
I was so proud of Jake as a 5-year-old. That kid was washing and drying his own clothes. And do you remember the reason? Because he didn't like the clothes that we were handing him. He had a certain clothes.
Prissy kind of 5-year-old. He was obsessing at 5.
He wanted his jeans to fit perfect and his shirts to fit perfect. And when we'd do the wash and we'd throw his clean clothes to him, he didn't want to wear those clothes. So he'd take his clothes that fit him perfectly and wash and dry those.
Well, who was it that put the red socks and the white socks together and they all came out with pink socks? I thought that was Jake.
I don't know.
But anyway, we roll with the punches. I mean, who cares what color your socks are? So.
And meanwhile, we let them watch anything on TV.
That was a mistake.
But it's the way the boomers did things. I mean, that was a good example of how the boomers did things. So we had the good thing with the kids being responsible, and we kind of hurt them when it came to mad slasher movies.
Yeah, we let them watch a mad slasher movie, and they all wind up sleeping with our middle daughter. And
it took them a couple of years to get over that.
I mean, it takes me a couple of years to get over a mad slasher movie. That stuff is traumatic. I can't believe they let Hollywood put that out. I mean, at least now we have ratings. Okay, so the boomers were the renaissance in social values, which needed to come, but he's so right. When we weren't aware of needing to replace it. We didn't close. There's open and close in systems. Systems are open to some degree, and then they close down. We didn't say, that's good enough, now we need to close down. Yeah. We've stayed open for 40 years. Now we have the ridiculous claims coming from the woke culture.
Oh, yeah.
Now, those are also openness. We're going to be open to ideas that are strange as hell.
And, of course, I say the going too far part of it comes because we have abundance.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's the real system view, is we're in a period of abundance where kids, Dave Smith makes his point, kids have a $150,000 loan, and because we were going to talk about student loan, they have $150,000 and they get a job at Starbucks and make $15. And so, of course, they're guided toward socialism because capitalism is not working for them.
That's right. Well, everyone claims it's capitalism. It's a far cry from capitalism.
It's a far cry from capitalism.
But everyone, that's what everyone's, well, it's this mental attitude. When something's wrong, government needs to fix it. And the idea of government fixing it is never less government involvement. That isn't what government does.
Yeah.
It's always more government involvement, which is more socialism.
Yeah. And there's really no way the government can fix an individual. The government really is too far away from all of the characteristics of change that an individual needs. If an individual needs to change, government is not the way to do it.
And I want you to make your comment about the transfer of wealth that he talked about.
Okay, so this is an easy one. Dave Smith is like, these damn whining boomers. They
what did he call biggest belly achers or something? Whiners and complainers.
Whiners and complainers. The boomers whining and complaining. When we oversaw the greatest wealth increase in human history.
Right.
Okay. Well, we did, and most of us didn't spend it.
Yeah,
and so when you look at the evidence as to what's happening now, and we're at the beginning of this happening, but we're in the first phase of it. Boomers die, they transfer this huge amount of wealth to their children. That is being talked about, the greatest transfer of wealth in human history.
Real transfer of wealth will be from the boomers to the next generation.
To their children.
Now who knows what the hell they're going to do with it?
Who knows what that's going to be like when you transfer wealth. I mean, well, who knows? But the fact is that wealth that the boomers created, it didn't go anywhere. The boomers can't take it to heaven or hell with them.
Right.
It has to go somewhere.
Right. Well, we feel pretty good about our kids. They seem to be responsible.
They're all three surprisingly frugal and responsible.
But,
I mean, in fact,
but they have their flaws, and I worry about them. But
everybody worries about their children. Yeah. But I mean, I think I attribute that economic prudence that they all three have to the token economy.
Well, I will not only give you credit for the token economy.
Well, you should. I'm a psychologist.
You're the psychologist.
I'm the one that studied Skinner.
The token economy. But I'll give you even more credit that your family was financially responsible.
And your family wasn't?
My family was not.
Okay, so
Mama was, but Papa, dominated the family
impulsively.
Finances. And we. And I'll say again, I've said this on a podcast before, I thought you and your family were rich because when you had a flat tire or something like that, it did not cause panic in your family. In our family, if there was any expense that anyone had, it was panic time. Something's got to.
You didn't have that in your pocket.
What are we going to do when
that is no way to live? That is no way to live. Now Dave Ramsey talks about that all the time, is that, that's a matter of responsibility, which is you do without stuff so that you have a emergency fund and you pay off your debts and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. But your family was very good about that. You had a car. I thought that was pretty damn good.
Didn't have any brakes.
We went on dates in your car.
Tim and I drove back from LSU without brakes. That was you might think that's fun. We did not think that was fun.
In my family, traveling a car without brakes was just
routine.
We all knew how to do that.
Tim and I was like, he was scared to death. I was driving. I was scared to death. There were two neurotic people driving without brakes. and drove that car. Of course, that was the last of that car.
The big green car?
No, that was the no. That was the little mama's car that she handed down to me. It was light, so it could slow down. I mean, it was.
If you took your foot off the gas, it would eventually stop.
How did we do that? We could gear down. I think that was a manual. We shifted down.
Yeah.
We had to shift down to make it stop.
With a manual transmission, you have a lot of latitude. If you
may think it was easy. I don't remember it being easy at all. But it was a long trip with not very many cars. I think we were smart enough to take off early in the morning where there wasn't, too many extra
I remember
cars.
Holes in the floorboard. You could look down and you could see the road going by, underneath you. And
okay, so we grew up in a family system where we both had to deal with being frugal or having enough money. It was not abundance for either of us. No. But my family handled it more responsibly than yours, but we weren't rich. We weren't rich.
If Papa had money, he shared it with
his friends.
Yeah. He a big spender. He enjoyed being the big shot.
He wanted to be the big shot.
He enjoyed being the big shot. He'd spend all the money, and then we wouldn't have groceries. And I remember, I've told you this many times, and I think Mama did this on purpose to shame Papa, but we had a small can of peaches. And as a family, we sat down at dinner and shared a small can of peaches for supper,
everybody.
For everybody. And I remember
this is why you have this food insecurity. I didn't know you had food insecurity until COVID, where you couldn't go buy food. And now your doctors say your commercial food is killing you, is clogging up your vessels.
I'm on this keto diet, and I halfway panic over these things that I cannot eat anymore.
Yeah. Now, this is fascinating, this food insecurity, because I'd heard a lot about it. I don't have it.
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't have it, but I don't.
You've been in training since you were 12 years old to starvation. You know how to starve.
Starvation diet is nothing to me. In fact, it feels very comfortable to not eat. I mean, this fasting thing is simpatico with my makeup. And of course, I am somewhat still fat, but I've been very fat, and it was all because I was so comfortable with starvation and thought it was a good thing. The medical mafia telling me, hey, just eat less calories. It's all mechanical. It's not mechanical, for Christ's sake.
It was calories, and then it was fat, and then it was
this,
protein,
that,
and carbs.
You're not eating enough grapefruit. It's one thing after another. Kill myself on that high carb diet I went on. Okay. So this thing about student loans, well, he's got that right too. The last thing I remember him saying is that the student loan solution is so ridiculous because it punishes the least guilty person, which is a real problem. That's a real problem, to be backwards in your parental reinforcement. And
Dave Smith doesn't say this, but other people are saying it, is that it's setting a precedent. Future students who are getting loans, they have every belief that they're going to be rescued. The student loan program doesn't help people who are getting ready to get a student loan. But the kids who are getting ready to get a student loan, they have every expectation that they're going to be rescued. And they're right. Yeah. It's just really bad parenting to reward children, young people, for doing the wrong thing and to punish the ones that did the right thing. Yeah. That is just, that cannot be the answer. There are some answers. And, he also talks, I don't know if in the tape you're using today, but he also talks about this system between government, the politics, and the colleges. And the colleges are charging these ridiculous prices, and the colleges are all up in it. I'm seeing this reporting on these psychologists that work at the medical schools and at the universities and the grants and all that. It's a big corrupt system, and it's just who knows where to start in changing it. Well, it's exploitive, and I guess it probably is corrupt, but it's exploitive for sure. You cannot pump money into these students for loans and not have, the schools are just doing supply and demand. There's a demand for their service. They increase the price of the supply. The government is increasing the demand. The school is increasing the price because that's how supply and demand works.
Well, you make that point. That's a very important point.
You know, I can't blame them. They're doing what the free market encourages them to do.
Yeah.